Welcome to Talking Business, the podcast produced in Melbourne, Australia. The podcast is available on the Acast site, my own website, the Apple Podcast Store, or wherever you go to get your podcasts. Or you can get it at the Business Acumen website at www.businessacumen.biz. For the most exclusive access to leading economists and business leaders from around the world, subscribe to Talking Business from my website, leongettler.com. I am Leon Gettler. My job is to review and monitor the week's news in business, finance and economics. I bring it all to you every week. This is episode number 45 in our series for 2024, and today's date is Friday, December the 6th. First, I'll be talking to Jonathan Walsh, General Manager APAC Essendex Australia, about the do's and don'ts, the benefits and pitfalls, and anything at all to do with SMS marketing for business. He can talk about the benefits of SMS for retail commerce and its impact on building customer relationships, targeted campaigns, ROI, and how it is becoming a forgotten medium, but a powerful tool for engaging with premium customers. And I was talking to AMP Capital Chief Economist Shane Oliver about what market and economic trends we can expect in 2025. But first, let's talk to Jonathan Walsh.
Okay, well, Jonathan, tell us about the benefits of SMS for retail and e-commerce and its impact on building customer relationships.
Yeah, there are a lot of benefits. I think the number one thing that our customers benefit from is the fact that it gets straight to where people are spending an inordinate amount of time at the moment. We're all spending more and more time on our mobile phones. And if you're anything like me, I've got a lot of unread emails and a lot of unread notifications from the 30 or 40 or 50 different apps that I've got on my phone, but I don't have too many unread SMS. There's the odd SMS from my mum that I should get back to in faster time, but I certainly take note of the SMS I receive. So I think that's the number one benefit that our customers speak to us about, is their ability to break through a lot of the noise that's happening on our mobile device these days, because we rely on it for so much. And I think the latest data from an Age article I read not long ago is that we check our phone 85 times a day, which is on average in Australia, which is extraordinary. And we're spending about 5.5 hours on there. So yeah, I think that's the number one thing, is that it's the most accessible channel of any of the media channels available to businesses and retailers in Australia.
Well, you could actually develop a really good targeted campaign doing that, can't you?
Yeah, that's right. I think one of the biggest challenges that businesses have is unowned media is getting harder and harder. So, lots of good changes around data privacy on our online profiles. So users now have more control over what ads they do and don't see, which is, I think, the betterment for everyone. The latest iPhone updates mean that we all have control over whether or not we allow ourselves to see third-party data or ads on, Facebook and Instagram and these kinds of applications. Cookies are getting more controllable. So, every website is now asking us whether we want to be tracked or not. So unknown media is becoming a lot harder, but the benefit of having a mobile phone number is then you have control over being able to reach your customers, and SMS, when done properly, can really cultivate those relationships and can be done in a really meaningful way.
And it would also deliver better ROI, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, an email, email is the channel that gets the most comparison to SMS. And there's a bit of a perception with people that haven't, or businesses that haven't used SMS for their marketing campaigns, that email is free and SMS has a cost. And whilst there might be some realities to that, we see, or we know that SMS, that 95% or more of every SMS is opened versus about 22% of email. So, there's a cost benefit there in knowing that, almost 100% of every SMS you sent is going to be seen by the people that you're trying to send to. And the other benefit is that SMS or 90% of SMS is opened in the first 3 minutes. So the ability of SMS to get to people, for them to act and behave quickly is really, really strong. And then we see an improvement in conversion rate. So our customers across the board, not just in Australia, but we work with customers globally and are fortunate enough to have offices in lots of really cool parts of the world. Email has a conversion rate on average of about 3.2% across our customers, whereas SMS is converting at about 32%. So yeah, it really is unparalleled in its success when done properly.
Well, the 3.2% figure for email is really interesting, because I've had dealings with certain people where I've emailed them and they ended up apologizing to me for not getting back to me, because they were longing to get back to their inbox when it was virtually empty.
Yeah, I have the same experience. Yeah, I think email, we did some analysis during the pandemic, and from 2020 onwards, the amount of email we've been receiving has been increased by about 20% year on year. So that's businesses and individuals. So I think, when we were all locked up in our homes, email became the go-to channel for lots of businesses to get in touch with people, and that's only increased each year since. So there's a lot more noise there. It's harder to find things. I mean, every other day I have someone contacted me over email and it's gone into my spam and I've missed it for those reasons, or just haven't been able to get back to it in a timely manner. But I get a lot fewer SMS, and again, except for my mum, and she will listen to this, so apologies, mum. But yeah, I get back to all of my SMS in a much more effective way, and our customers are telling us the same thing.
Well, what I tend to do now is when I send an urgent email to someone, I actually send them a text message too, saying, I sent you an email about this.
Yeah, I do exactly the same thing.
Now, you did some research last year during Black Friday around customer expectations in retail and how they spend their hard-earned money. Is that right?
Yeah, we did. So this was a global study that we did, and what we found that breaking it down into Australia, that 75% of Aussie consumers stop shopping a month before Black Friday, and they save their money for the sales. I've been with Essendex for 4 years now, and Black Friday was around as a retail campaign when I started, and it has been for a little while. But each and every year, it's just amplified and got bigger and bigger. And I think what Australian retailers need to recognize, if they don't already, is they're now competing in a global economy. We can buy things from anywhere in the world now and have them delivered to our home as quickly as we can from anywhere in Australia. So the likes of Amazon and eBay and those kinds of marketplaces mean that Australian retailers need to take them on head to head, and if they're not putting some emphasis and effort around Black Friday, they are going to be left behind.
You've got Australian retail case studies, haven't you, about how certain outfits like fashion retailer Black Pepper, they achieved something like 8.4 times more online purchases with the use of an SMS marketing campaign?
Yeah, they're one example. We get told all the time that SMS has been the best performing channel, and what our customers are trying to work out, and everyone approaches it in different ways, is the best way to do that. And let's face it, SMS can be intrusive. We've all been hit by scams and are getting unruly messages, and that happens in email and other channels as well. But because SMS does get straight into the palm of your hand and can be viewed as being really intrusive, our customers are finding different ways to do it. So what we're seeing now is using SMS a lot more as a VIP treatment, the ability to have a real relationship and conversation with customers rather than just blasting them and saying, here's our sale, is to actually give important customers or repeat customers or VIP customers early access to periods like Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So before a sale becomes available to everybody, giving people access 24 hours earlier. And SMS has been a really successful channel in getting that message across and making sure that your VIP treatment customers are feeling as such and treated as such, because it's not going to get lost in the minutiae of email they're receiving. They're going to receive the SMS, they're going to see it, and that's leading to those really high conversion rates that we've seen amongst a lot of our customers.
And Black Pepper would be one example of that?
Exactly right. Yeah, and yeah, that there's many of them that are seeing that benefit.
And so, what was their trick, that they actually targeted their important customers?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the first thing that people need to understand, and most people will, is you need to have permission to be able to send someone SMS under the Australian Communication Media Authority or spam code. So you can't just get a list of mobile phone numbers from anywhere and start sending marketing offers. So you do need to have permission to send SMS to those people first. But yeah, their method was to target their existing customers, their frequent customers, and get that SMS to them first before they went public with offers and sales to other people and start using other channels.
Right. Okay. And a number of other retailers have done that?
Yeah, we're seeing new retailers sign up to our platform every day of the week, and it's the other thing that's happened with Black Friday and Cyber Monday is the preparation for that has started to become earlier and earlier. 4 years ago, we were hearing from customers in October, just before Black Friday. Now we're starting to talk to customers in January or February. They're starting to think that far ahead about how they're going to manage the Black Friday and Cyber Monday period, because it's become so important to them.
Which means they actually have to start thinking strategically much more.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because the example I used before with marketplaces like eBay and Amazon, you know, that it kind of still scares me a little bit that you can order something on Amazon and have it delivered to you the same day or the day after. And that's a big challenge for, you know, Australia is such a big country. It's a hard country from a logistics challenge to get things shipped around. But it does mean that small and local Australian retailers do need to be prepared and organised as quickly as they can to make sure that they're not missing out on you know, what has become, if not the biggest, then certainly the second biggest retail period behind Christmas and Boxing Day.
And it means you really have to know which are your best customers as a retailer.
Exactly right. Yeah. And you know, we've all heard the business stat that's trotted out about the expense of winning a new customer over retaining an existing one. So yeah, the ability to send an SMS that's going to cost you know, a few cents to retain an existing customer is just about the most cost-effective way to get another sale.
So do you expect more retailers will be getting onto this?
Yeah, I expect the week before Black Friday to still be really busy for us because there'll be a few that are forgotten and we'll want a panic campaign. But yeah, we've been working with a group of our customers since you know, the middle of this year. You know, you start those conversations in January and February about what their plans are, and then that really ramps up, you know, June, July, and then, you know, even more so from, you know, September onwards, really gearing up and getting ready.
Well, Jonathan, thank you very much for your time.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
And now let's talk to AMP Capital Chief Economist Shane Oliver. Well, Shane, everyone wants to know what your views are of the market and the economy in 2025.
To be honest with you, Leon, I think it's a fairly messy picture, but I think ultimately it will turn out okay. We're still seeing central banks head towards rate cuts, and I think the same will apply ultimately to the Reserve Bank here in Australia. But by the same token, inflation still remains a little bit sticky in some countries, notably recently the US. And of course, there's still issues in the UK to some degree on inflation and also in Australia. So it's going to be a fairly gradual process of getting rates down. And then, of course, the big uncertainty is what happens with Donald Trump in terms of his mix of policies regarding what might be seen as positive for markets, where they initially reacted favourably, particularly the tax cuts and deregulation, versus what may create more uncertainty, which is the tariffs. And so far, the evidence is that he's going to move ahead on both. And so that's probably going to create a bit of volatility as we go through the year. We know that tariffs can potentially add a bit of upwards pressure to inflation. That might make the Fed a bit more cautious. And it can also result in potentially a trade war as other countries retaliate. And we've already seen Donald Trump announce, pencil in, if you want to, he could change around, and he's known to be a bit fickle, but he's penciled in a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico and 10% on China from day one. So that's probably going to be a big focus, very different to his first term where he did the tax cuts first and then focused on the tariffs only from 2018. So I suspect we're going to see a bit of volatility. Ultimately, though, I think Donald Trump's mandate was to get inflation and cost of living down. And so if he's doing things which add to inflation, such as big tariff hikes, then Americans will punish him and the Republican Party, which will put some pressure on Trump. And he also wants to see the share market go up rather than down, which I think also acts as a bit of constraint on how much he'll do on the tariff front. But I guess we have to assume that it's going to be a fairly more volatile year than what we've seen in 2024. But ultimately, I think it's probably going to be okay. It's just that returns will be a lot more volatile and more constrained.
The issue with tariffs, and of course this don't take effect until January, end of January, when he takes office, is that we don't know this announcement is just a bargaining chip because Donald Trump is very much into deals.
He is very much into deals, and so that's the point of debate, whether the tariffs, and he's originally said 10 to 20% general tariff and 60% tariff on China. We don't know whether that's an end point that he wants to get to, effectively isolating the US to some degree from the world trading system, or whether it's just a bargaining tool. I suspect there's probably an element of both. I think Trump is, we know he is pro-tariff. We know he wants more manufacturing in the US, but he's also known to bargain. And of course, we saw that back in 2018, where he put the tariffs on, and then when it looked like causing big problems for him politically, then as share markets fell, he then sort of pivoted to the so-called phase one trade deal with China. The other aspect is that the tariffs that have been announced recently on Truth Social, their social media platform, relate to drugs, fentanyl, and illegal aliens. It's not trade related. So it looks like, if he gets deals in terms of Mexico slowing the flow of immigrants across the border, or China agreeing to concretely stop illicit fentanyl getting across to the US, then those sorts of things could mean he could back down from those tariffs. But then there still remains what he might do in terms of trade. So I think at this stage it's still very hard to tell. But I guess the bottom line is we're probably not going to see the extreme tariffs he's referred to in the election campaign. We'll probably end up settling somewhere in between, so not quite as bad. And it may well be that the tariffs are initially announced at very high levels and then they're scaled back, which is what Scott Bessent has referred to his nomination for Treasury Secretary in terms of escalating to de-escalate. If that's the case, then that's not such a bad outcome eventually, because you get this uncertainty associated with the escalation, as we saw in 2018. And then once de-escalation occurs, then some of that negative market impact may be unwound.
Indeed. And the issue with Australia is that, the Reserve Bank is saying that they're not convinced ultimately with the inflation figures. In latest quarterly figures show they're down, but and in the target band. But the Reserve Bank is saying, no, we want to see a few more of these before we start cutting rates. And the view is that inflation won't actually come down until 2026 and maybe beyond. What's your view about that?
Well, that's been their forecast for a long time. They haven't really changed. If you go back a year ago, that was their forecast, that we wouldn't get inflation back in the target at the midpoint until 2026. So there hasn't really been a big change on that front. And then the debate has been, well, if we're heading along that path, could the RBA start cutting before we're actually back in the target range in 2026? And the RBA, when asked that question, have said, well, yes, we can. We're not going to wait till it's actually in there, because by then it might be too late to cut interest rates, because the economy could be a lot weaker. So I tend to think they will be somewhat forward-looking. It doesn't mean they have to wait to 2026 before cutting rates. And indeed, in the minutes from the last meeting, they actually stressed that the Reserve Bank needs to remain forward-looking, not just fixated on backward-looking indicators. And of course, inflation is a backward-looking indicator. But then a few paragraphs later, they contradicted that to some degree by saying, or provided a more bearish commentary or hawkish commentary by saying that they need to see two good CPIs, or good underlying inflation numbers in a row. And they're referring to the quarterly numbers, and presumably the September quarter numbers that we've already got weren't good enough. They were down, but still relatively high at 3.5% underlying. So you can take what you want from that. On the one hand, yes, they're going to want to see two good CPI quarters. That sort of takes you out to May as the timing for the first rate cut. Alternatively, if they're going to be more forward-looking, then maybe they only need to see one. And of course, we know from 2022, when Philip Lowe, the previous governor, was asked about this, he said, what would you do before raising rates in 2022? And he said, I'd want to see two high quarterly CPIs in a row. And in the event he raised rates only after getting one quarterly high CPI on its own. And in response, he was asked, well, how come? And he said, well, we've got to be flexible. So I guess you could it leaves it all a bit unclear. I think if the December quarter inflation numbers are low enough, then the Reserve Bank would probably move in February. And our base case is for a cut in February, but it's a very close call. And I'd have to say there is a high risk that it gets delayed till May. The money market has fully factored in a cut for May and only has about a 35% probability on a move in February. But you can see why economists are sort of split on this. It depends which aspect of the minutes and RBA commentary give primary attention to. And also you've got to bear in mind that they have backtracked from what they've said in the past regarding how many CPIs they need to start cutting rates or start changing rates. So it is a bit of a confusing picture, but I think we are heading in the right direction. If you look at business surveys, NAB, National Australia Bank, and the PMI, which have come out over the last few weeks, the clear message there is that inflationary pressures are still trending down quite nicely. In fact, APRA price inflation on those two surveys looks to be back where it was pre-pandemic. But of course, bottom line is people waiting for a mortgage rate cut. You've at least got to wait 3 months out to February, and because the RBA doesn't meet till late February this time around. and alternatively, it could be as far out as May. So 3 to 6 months, I think, before we start to see rate cuts.
And the other issue too that people should be looking out for is not only the trim mean, but services inflation, which is not affected by government subsidies.
No, services inflation is still relatively high. It's running at 4.8% on the latest monthly data. Of course, a lot of the components that relate to services weren't surveyed in the November figures, so we won't get a firmer read on them till another couple of months before we get those numbers out. Some of them you get a bit of an update in the November numbers. Others you've got to wait till the December numbers come out. So that adds a little bit of uncertainty there. But services inflation is still too high. Interestingly, services inflation in Australia at 4.8% is actually below where it is in the UK. And this is the odd thing. In some areas, the inflationary numbers aren't that different to the US and the UK. If you're looking at core CPI in the US and the UK, it's around 3.2, 3.3. In Australia, it's about 3.5, so it's not that different. If you look at services inflation in the UK, it's actually above 5%. In Australia, it's about 4.8%. And if you look at wage inflation, it's actually lower in Australia than it is in those two countries. On some metrics, Australia does look a little bit better, even though we're often portrayed as being worse. But bottom line is the Reserve Bank is still taking a cautious approach, and we have to accept that.
Well, the other issue too is what's happening with the markets. And of course, in February, you've got your reporting season coming up. What do you expect there?
We do have reporting season in markets. The Aussie share market has pushed on to record highs, which may surprise many given the uncertainties globally around Trump, tariffs, uncertainties around China, the delays in the RBA cutting rates. Don't forget, a year ago, many thought that, including ourselves, that the RBA would have cut in the middle of 2024. And of course, that hasn't happened. So despite all of that, the share market has gone to record highs. That, obviously a lot of volatility around that, but that's partly predicated on a pickup in profit growth as we go through 24, 25. So that's what's key in all of this. Once we get the February reporting season, I think investors will be hoping that they're going to see some more positive signs regarding profits. In other words, profits are starting to turn the corner and starting to rise, and either at least in the actual numbers or at least in the outlook comments. So that is a bit of a stress point for the local market, apart from the issues around tariffs and rate cuts, that the market's going to be looking at those numbers very closely, because the price earnings multiple of around 21 times forward earnings is on the high side, and it's arguably only defensible if you start to see stronger profit growth coming out through 2025. So those earnings reports are going to be looked at quite closely.
Well, it'll be fascinating to watch. And Shane, we're all looking forward to that. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Leon. Take care.
So what's happening in the news? Well, a judge in Delaware has rebuffed Tesla's attempt to revive a $56 billion pay package for Elon Musk, as if he needs it. She says that shareholders' overwhelming reapproval was not enough to override her previous rejection of the package. Monday's decision is a stinging rebuke of the world's most valuable car maker and chief executive, Musk, the richest man in the world, who has been riding high since Donald Trump was elected for a second term as US president a month ago. Judge Kathleen McCormick concluded that Tesla's unprecedented effort to push the 2018 pay package through a second time, 4 months after she first voided it, was creative. But the board had no procedural ground for flipping the outcome of an adverse post-trial decision based on evidence they created after trial, she wrote on Monday. Tesla vowed to appeal against the decision. This ruling, if not overturned, meant judges, plaintiffs, lawyers, Delaware companies rather than their rightful owners, the shareholders, had said. Absolute corruption, Musk wrote on X, his social media platform. And Australian housing prices have increased for the 22nd month in a row, but the market appears to be losing steam after its weakest results since the run of consecutive monthly growth began. The Home Value Index compiled by data group CoreLogic showed housing prices rose by a modest 0.1% in November, its weakest Australia-wide result since January 2023. Last month, the national median house price was $812,933. In Sydney, the median house prices was $1,196,809. It was $776,949 in Melbourne, $886,540 in Brisbane, and $813,716 in Adelaide. November could be the last month of growth in this cycle, according to CoreLogic's research director Tim Lawless. He said the downturn was gathering speed in Melbourne and Sydney, and the market in the mid-sized capitals, which have recently experienced the highest growth, was also slowing down. Rents increased in every capital city in November, with the national rental index rising by 0.2%. CoreLogic considers rental market to be experiencing a relatively flat run of growth, even though rents are still rising at more than twice the pre-pandemic decade average of 2%. Overall, the Australia-wide price of rental properties has increased by 5.3% over the past 12 months. A year ago, rents were increasing at the annual rate of 8.1%, according to the CoreLogic report. And Woolworths says 2 weeks of industrial action has cut $50 million in sales from its supermarket business as the retailer struggles to stock shelves. The shortages at stores spread from Woolworths to a second ASX-listed group, Endeavour, which operates Dan Murphy's and BWS bottle shops. Having demerged from Woolworths in 2021, some of Endeavour's stores are still supplied through the supermarkets group distribution centres. With negotiations between the country's largest supermarket operator and the United Workers' Union dragging on, Woolworths has applied for an urgent order to ensure access to distribution sites in Victoria and New South Wales. More than 1,500 United Workers' Union members have been striking since November the 21st. The union wants Woolworths to scrap new productivity rules that will discipline employees for not working fast enough. Woolworths is using algorithmic management tools to track every move and wanting employees to work harder and faster. This has led to claims of increased risk of serious injury, mental stress, and the looming threat of disciplinary action or even loss of employment. The $50 million hit to Woolworths supermarket sales in Australia was not factored into the company's sales update in October. At the time, Woolworths warned it expected earnings to come in between $1.48 billion and $1.53 billion in the 6 months to December 31, below the $1.59 billion last year and well short of the $1.64 billion that the market had expected. And Australia's late-night approval of reforms to the Reserve Bank of Australia, or the RBA, is poised to reshape its governance structure significantly. The key change involves splitting the RBA board into two entities, a monetary policy board and a governance board, reflecting recommendations from a 2023 independent review. The reform aims to improve the RBA's decision-making and adaptability to complex economic challenges. The new board will include RBA Governor Michelle Bullock, Deputy Governor Andrew Hauser and Treasury Secretary Stephen Kennedy. The remaining 6 members will be appointed by Treasurer Jim Chalmers, with a focus on individuals with diverse economic expertise. The inclusion of new members raises questions about the board's stance on monetary policy, with economists predicting a period of market adjustment as the new board's approach becomes clearer. Bullock may opt to disclose unattributed voting outcomes from meetings and encourage board members to deliver public speeches. These changes aim to align the RBA's practices more closely with those of major central banks like the US Federal Reserve. And savvy shoppers pouncing on early Black Friday sales have helped deliver higher than expected retail sales in October. The solid 0.6% uptick in retail turnover clocked by the Australian Bureau of Statistics in October was higher than the 0.4% consensus forecast and the more subdued 0.1% gain in September. Retail sales were up 3.4% on a year earlier at $36.7 billion. Income tax cuts, lower petrol and energy prices and evaporating chances of more rate hikes might be boosting further spending in the shops. Consumers had cut back on non-essential spending over the past couple of years because of the strain on household budgets from high inflation and 13 cash rate rises. Viewed alongside rising building approvals, economist Ivan Colquhoun said the Reserve Bank of Australia was likely to stay focused on inflationary pressures rather than the risk of an economy slowing too quickly. Consumer spending and retail prices has increased slightly in recent months, possibly helped by the 1st of July income tax cuts, the Creditor Watch Consulting chief economist said. Housing approvals are also strengthening, which means there doesn't seem to be an urgent need for the RBA to cut interest rates, even though many mortgage holders and small businesses would welcome this. Strength in the jobs market and other indicators of economic resilience have cast doubt over an early 2025 start and up the chances of an adjustment in May or later. And more people are struggling to pay their home, electricity and gas bills, despite government rebates taking some of the edge off rising prices, reigniting tensions between consumer advocates and retailers enjoying soaring profits. The Australian Energy Regulator's latest assessment of retail markets found household electricity prices rose up 16% over the 2023-24 financial year, while gas prices rose up 12%, putting extra strain on consumers already hit by cost of living increases. Complaints of energy billing to retailers and to an ombudsman jumped in the year, although energy affordability improved for many households thanks to government energy price rebates. The regulator described energy debt and hardship as a persistent problem despite regulatory protections, government rebates and retailers' customer support schemes. AER board member Jared Ball said the proportion of household customers in retailer hardship programs rose to 1.9% from 1.4%, while the average debt levels for those entering such programs jumped. Many consumers continue to struggle with energy costs, as indicated by the total number of customers in debt and in hardship programs, Mr. Ball said. The findings come after the country's biggest electricity retailer, AGL Energy, posted vastly improved products last financial year, while arch rivals Origin Energy and Energy Australia also recorded sharp improvements in retailing margins thanks to higher prices. And a new report by the BCA ranked Victoria as the worst state or territory for doing business, with more onerous regulations acting against growth and investment on a range of measures. South Australia was rated as the best place to run a business for the second year in a row. South Australia earned the top spot, largely due to a lower level of payroll taxes, property charges and business licensing obligations, the BCA said. And the next best jurisdictions for business were Tasmania, the ACT and the Northern Territory. They were followed by New South Wales, Queensland, Western Australia and Victoria in 8th spot. The BCA's scorecard looked at planning systems, payroll taxes, property taxes and charges, retail trading hours, workers' compensation premiums and licences to do business. And Labor has sought to placate business concerns about the potential exclusion of construction workers from an overhauled skilled visa system by making it easier for builders and other tradies eligible to migrate to Australia in a bid to ease a housing crisis. The Albanese government is in the midst of creating a 3-tier skilled migration system with separate visa streams for low-paid care workers, highly paid professionals earning more than $135,000, and a core stream for workers earning between $70,000 and $135,000, where there is a skill shortage. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke said Labor's chances to the skilled occupation list would include adding housing construction trades to the core list. The government is determined to tackle the skill shortage, especially in the construction sector, he said. This is an important step to attract qualified workers to help build more homes. The new list, set to be released later this week, has been compiled using labour market analysis and stakeholder consultation undertaken by Job and Skills Australia. The list will be used to fill positions where no Australian worker is available. It controversially includes jobs such as yoga instructors and martial arts coaches, among 450 professions. A builder earning more than $135,000 will still be excluded from Labor's fast-track top-tier status, a major concession to trade unions. Business groups, including Master Builders and the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, have been lobbying the government to speed up construction worker arrivals, warning that as many as 500,000 extra tradies are needed if Labor is to have any chance of delivering on its promise to build 1.2 million new homes around the country by 2029. And the head of Australia's financial crime watchdog says key overseas allies are welcoming moves to close gaps in anti-money laundering and terror financing rules, conceding criminals have been able to exploit ineffective laws for too long. Days after Parliament passed new laws to add real estate agents, lawyers and accountants to the dirty money protection regime, Austrac Chief Executive Brendan Thomas said he was determined to crack down on more than $60 billion in harm caused by drug trafficking, scams, child exploitation and human trafficking. In a marathon final week of Parliament, the Senate on Thursday finalised plans to expand laws requiring certain professionals to understand the source of their clients' wealth and to report suspicious financial matters to authorities. Australia has been lobbied for years by overseas partners, including in the G20 group, to close gaps in domestic laws. Britain and other countries have pushed Australia to act, warning high-end property purchasers were funneling suspicious funds into Australia. The new obligations for so-called Tranche 2 businesses will come into force from July 2026, a timeline Mr Thomas said would enable sufficient consultation and planning to ensure businesses were prepared. Australia at the moment is falling foul of the international standards that the world expects to be in place to combat money laundering. It makes our economy weaker and it gives our economy a bad reputation in the world's eyes, he said. Money laundering and organised crime is a global business. We suffer the challenge of international criminals who commit crimes in other countries, laundering money and parking value there. We want to make sure that the international armour is strengthened as it possibly can be against money laundering. On Sunday, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called on the coalition to explain why it opposed the changes. Labor has previously accused opponents of the plan of giving assistance to criminal gangs and child abusers. The coalition did not act on a 2016 report that recommended tougher laws in line with Financial Action Task Force recommendations. And Tesla chairwoman Robin Denholm will lead the first review of Australia's research and development landscape in almost 20 years as the Albanese government seeks a better return on scientific spending to expand the economy. This is because R&D investment as a proportion of Australia's GDP stands at 1.68%, below the OECD average of 2.73%. Government spending totaled $4.3 billion in 2022-23, according to Australian Bureau of Statistics data. R&D spending by businesses was growing until 2022, but moves by multinationals to save money after the COVID-19 pandemic led to a collapse. In Australia, the information communications and technology sector leads R&D spending, with much of the output coming from small and medium-sized businesses. Releasing the terms of reference for the government's year-long review, Industry and Science Minister Ed Husic insisted everything was on the table for possible reforms due to an unsustainable disconnect between innovation and the country's economic ambitions. Ms Denholm will work with former Australian National University Vice-Chancellor Ian Chubb, as well as surgeon and former Australian of the Year Fiona Wood and Victorian startup expert Kate Cornick. The expert panel will consider how changes to government R&D spending could better maximise the value of existing investment, including in government, universities, philanthropy and private industry. Stronger links between research and industry organisations, the mobility of researchers and better coordination by government at all levels are all included in the review scope. The terms of reference also ask for an assessment of how R&D is supporting national priorities and how science agencies could better support innovation across the economy. And that's it for this week. And next week I'll be talking to Gavin Bessarabi, the co-founder of Confidence Club, a subscription-based service that offers customers a discreet and convenient way to purchase essential incontinence products. And I'll be talking to independent economist Saul Eslake about what to expect in the Australian and global economies in 2025. For the most exclusive access to leading economists and business leaders from around the world, subscribe to Talking Business from my website, leongettler.com. If you like Talking Business, please leave us a review with Apple Podcasts. Thank you in advance. In the meantime, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, or X as it's now known, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. If you want to contact me, email me at leon@leongettler.com. I answer all emails. Also, in my spare time, I have a copywriting business. If anyone needs newsletters, blogs, articles or advertorial, email me. Looking forward to the next episode of Talking Business.